Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
What an honor to have with us Nouriel Roubini, professor. He's not emeritus when you travel like he does.
I don't know.
He's such a young kid. I don't know how emeritus he is. At New York University, of course, Chairman Roubini at Global Economics. One of the great moments for me was with Professor Roubini in Davos a million years ago, where he simply outlined 2007, 8, and 9 to come. Nouriel, I don't care. The reason you're here is I'm looking May 31st, Munich. Wow. I mean, a hitter like you got to be looking the private skybox on StubHub, Inter Milan versus PSG for $29,000. You got 2 seats in the private skybox. Are you going to roll that?
I'll watch it on TV.
It's very exciting. He's a diehard from his youth in the old world, Inter Milan
an Inter fan.
I want to go back. This is really serious, folks, and it's off the radar right now. It shouldn't be. Brad Setzer, who you started, has been on fire. You and Brad Setzer wrote a book 11 years ago, whatever. Fred Bergston wrote the wonderful introduction on an EM. How does EM affect it? When I see Taiwan dollar go out 5 standard deviations, whatever, how is emerging a market off the radar affected by China, US, Canada, US, EU? What happens to your EM?
Well, the good news for EM is that this time around, the trade shock have not led to a strengthening of the dollar, but rather a weakening of the dollar. And where the dollar weakens, EM currencies tend to appreciate. It's also true that some of these Asian nations are sitting on trillions of dollars of U.S. treasuries because their foreign reserves are very high. And there's been some diversification because we've dented, the dollar as a major global reserve currency given our unstable policies. So as people move out of U.S. Treasury and sell them and then go back to their own local currency, there has been some appreciation, and that has taken some momentum. There's also hope in Asia, I think, that there'll be trade deals and the announced reciprocal tariffs are going to be much smaller than announced on April 2nd. That's also strengthening some of these currencies because some of them were weakening because of the risk of a trade war and so on. So I think there's a variety of factors leading to that happening.
How concerned are you, if at all, about the U.S. economy in the face of the uncertainty of all this trade discussion, the back and forth? It seems like consumers might be pulling back. It seems like corporate executives are pulling back on guidance. They're not sure how it's going to impact their businesses. How do you think that's going to affect the U.S. economy?
Well, there are some headwinds coming from trade and its uncertainty, and there are some tailwinds coming from strong capex, especially AI-driven, and still good income growth creation and so on. I would say that over the medium term, actually, I'm quite bullish about the U.S. economy. I think that because of technology, U.S. potential growth by the end of the decade could be 4%, an increase of 200 basis points. And even poor trade and migration policy can reduce growth only by 50 basis points. So the ratio between the good stuff, 200 basis points, to the bad 50 is 4-to-1. So I think we'll be on the verge of a secular boom over the next few years. So I'm quite optimistic. But then in the short run, we'll have probably a near recession by year end. There is an increase in that.
You mentioned a medium term. You got to be from Europe to mention a medium term. We don't do that in America. My basic conundrum, Nouriel Roubini, is we've got the short-term reality within an American political system, which you live with President Clinton, out to the long-term view of whatever Trump economics is in maybe a more optimistic future. How do we get, as they would say up in Maine, Nouriel, you don't know this, up in Maine where Lisa collects black flies, they get from here to there. How do we get from short-term to long-term success?
The way we get it is that this year there'll be a massive slowdown of growth. As you point out, consumer and business confidence is down. Inflation is going to go core PCE to 4% by year end. That's going to be a significant hit on real disposable income. So by Q4, we're going to be in a near recession. The good news is that the Fed is now credibly committed to fight inflation. They're not cutting rates, therefore inflation expectations are anchored. Therefore, once inflation is higher but growth is lower and you have a beginning of an increase in unemployment rate, the Fed is going to be able to cut rates. I think it's going to be a short and shallow recession, maybe a couple of quarters, Q4 and Q1 of next year, and then we'll have a strong recovery because the tailwinds coming from technology are massive. U.S. is leading in all the technology of the future.
Claims are out there on plan. Unit labor costs and productivity were elevated. That's what we'll talk about here. Unit labor costs jumped from a revised 2% up to 5.7%. I got a tariff regime of 3%. You arguably were one of the people that set up, coming off the Atlantic Charter, the global trade, the globalization mantra of a lower tariff regime. Even if we pop from 145% drama in China and we come back down to like a blended 13%, I don't get it. Isn't the gap from a 3% blended tariff up to a 10% or 13% blended tariff, isn't that insurmountable?
Probably the blend is going to be more than 13 because my baseline is 10 to 15% for all the world and 60% for China. So the blended could be in the high teens. It's a bad world, but let's put it this way. Suppose that there is an average tariff, say reciprocal on Europe of 10% as opposed to 20. Big deal. The euro can go up and down 10% in a matter of months. So is it good? No. Is it terrible? Something is going to destroy the world? Probably not, because currency can move more than 10% in a matter of months. So, of course, it's a world that is fragmented, it's a world that is deglobalized. But if the average tariff were being, say, 10, 15% rather than only 3%, the impact on growth is going to be, moderate, I would say. It's going to be moderate. Of course, with China, it's a different story. With China at 60%, we're going to decouple from China. And the shock on their growth and the shock on inflation is going to be significant. So I'm more worried about the fact we're not going to de-escalate with China to a significant extent.
With all of your political economics, Nouriel Roubini, do you believe common sense will come to the rescue in Washington?
Well, more than common sense. In December, I said there'll be 4 guardrails against stupid policy like tariffs, market discipline, good economic advisors, Fed discipline, and thin majority in Congress. Guess what? When the stock market crashed, bond yields were higher, credit spreads are higher, they're always higher, they blinked. And they started to de-escalate. 2, in that game of chicken between Trump and Powell, Trump blinked because he knew he was going to fire Powell, there'll be a shock to the market. So he blinked, and therefore Fed independence was a binding constraint. Eventually, the Peter Navarro of the world were sidelines, and the Scott Bessent of the world had the upper hand, good economic advisors. And the fact is, a team minority, he was boxed in by 4 guardrails. That's exactly what they said in December.
I'm running out of time. I got goosebumps because I got Nouriel Roubini and Richard Portis back to back. I mean, it's an academic wonk fest here right now. Have you ever done a panel with Peter Navarro?
I've not done a panel. I met him during the Trump 1 administration in the White House a couple of times. So it's strange. He has a PhD in economics from Harvard.
Did you teach Navarro economics at New York University?
No, he was at PhD at Harvard. But we didn't overlap. Yeah, surprising, a PhD in economics from Harvard. But Steve Miran has also a PhD in economics from Harvard. So do I.
How does I got 20 seconds. How does Inter Milan beat PSG?
What?
How does Inter Milan beat PSG?
I don't know.
You're going to be there. You spent $28,000 to go. Nouriel Roubini, thank you.
Hopefully Inter is going to win.
Lisa wants to know, when's the new book out?
I don't have a new one. Mega Threats came out 2 years ago, it's still going. And all the themes of the book, Mega Threats, are still very important today. All the threats I talked about are materializing.
Okay.
So,
Nouriel, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. Nouriel Roubini.